All right, welcome. Today, we're going to crack open an ancient blueprint for empire building. We're looking at the biblical chronicler's account of how King David, a leader from 3,000 years ago, took a small tribal territory and forged it into a real regional powerhouse.
So let's just kick things off with a huge question. How do you build an empire from scratch? I mean, it's a challenge that has shaped human history. And 3,000 years ago, a leader named David was staring this exact problem right in the face. He had the vision, sure, but he had to figure out how to make that a reality.
Okay, let's get into this. From the chronicler's point of view, David wasn't just on some personal power trip. His goal was bigger. He wanted to build a physical territory that would literally serve as God's kingdom on earth. So it was a divine mission, but one that was going to require some very real, very worldly actions.
And that gets us right to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? A kingdom, any kingdom, needs land. And David's starting point, his tribe of Judah, was a pretty small patch of ground. If he was going to build an empire, he was going to have to expand. And that meant one thing: war.
You know, any empire builder knows rule number one. You have to secure your own backyard before you can even think about expanding. So David's first moves were all about dealing with his immediate rivals, the ones who were constantly pushing into his land.
So this table kind of lays out David's two-front challenge. To the west, you've got the Philistines. These guys were a major power, and they'd been dominating the region for a long time. They even defeated David's predecessor, Saul. David didn't just push them back, he completely reversed their gains. Then you look east, and he conquers the Moabites, locking down his entire flank along the Dead Sea.
Okay, so with his home turf secured, David's next move was just incredibly smart. It wasn't just about grabbing more land for the sake of it. This was about economics. It was about opening up a gateway to the wider world.
So his armies marched south right into the land of Edom. And this was a huge, rugged territory, stretching all the way from the southern edge of the Dead Sea down to the Gulf of Aqaba. And here is the absolutely crucial piece of the puzzle. Conquering Edom wasn't really about the land itself. It was about controlling one specific city, Ezion-Geber. This port was the key to the southern seas. By controlling it, David's kingdom suddenly had access to incredibly valuable trade routes, which, of course, were essential for funding his growing empire.
Now, with the south under his belt, David's focus swings back to the east. And this next conflict is described in the ancient texts as being exceptionally brutal. For literally centuries, the reason why was a complete historical mystery.
His opponents this time? The Ammonites, another kingdom located to the east of the Jordan River. And the war that broke out between them and David's forces was incredibly severe, even for that time.
And that just begs the question, right? What on earth happened here? What could possibly provoke such a vicious, all-out response from David's army? The standard texts we have give us a few clues, but it feels like they kind of jump into the middle of the story, like there's a piece missing.
Well, believe it or not, the answer was hidden away for 2,000 years, until it was rediscovered in a cave near the Dead Sea. A lost fragment from the book of Samuel suddenly cast a whole new light on the terrifying events that led up to this war.
And what that text revealed was just horrifying. The Ammonite king, a man named Nahash, had been systematically oppressing the Israelite tribes. His method was sickeningly precise. He gouged out the right eye of every man. Now think about that. Most warriors back then used their right eye to aim a spear or a bow. This wasn't random cruelty. This was a deliberate military campaign to permanently disable an entire generation of soldiers.
So you have to wonder, why was this shocking detail lost for so long? Well, it probably came down to a simple mistake made by a scribe, an error called haplography. Basically, a scribe was copying the text hundreds of years ago, and his eye likely jumped from one word to a similar one a few lines down, accidentally deleting this entire crucial passage from history until the scrolls brought it back.
You know, this discovery is so much more than just a historical footnote. It's a brutal reminder that the trauma of war is absolutely timeless. The kind of horror inflicted by Nahash would have been immense, something that today we might recognize as causing a deep, generational PTSD.
So understanding that extreme provocation really sets the stage for the final phase of David's conquests. This is where he would not only get his revenge, but also forge a true, lasting empire.
The Ammonites, realizing they were completely outmatched, went and hired powerful Aramean mercenaries from the north. But it didn't matter. David's armies, led by his top general Joab, just crushed this alliance, conquered the Ammonite capital, and solidified control over that entire region.
And building an empire isn't just about winning wars. It's also about writing your national story. And the chronicler, our source for this whole blueprint, he's acting like a careful historian here. He's faced with two different accounts of who killed Goliath. He doesn't just pick one. He actually analyzes the text to create a cohesive history, concluding that this other soldier must have killed Goliath's brother. It just shows you the level of detail they put into crafting the empire's official story.
So let's just recap in the military side of things. David subdues the Philistines in the west, he conquers Moab and Edom to the east and south, and he smashes that powerful Ammonite-Aramaean alliance. He had built a massive territory through pure conquest. But a pile of conquered land, that isn't a kingdom.
And this right here is the crucial next step. David immediately starts building the institutions of a state. This isn't just an army anymore. He appoints top military leaders like Joab, for sure, but he also creates a professional civil service, administrators and scribes to manage everything. He sets up a formal priesthood under Zadok to give the kingdom religious legitimacy, and he creates an elite palace guard to protect the center of power. This is how you turn a conquest into a lasting government.
And the end result of all of this? A complete empire. I mean, look at this. A territory stretching all the way from the trading ports on the Gulf of Aqaba in the south, way up north to the mountain ranges of modern-day Lebanon. It was a staggering achievement.
But it's really important to understand what kind of empire this was. David didn't micromanage every little part of it. Instead, what he created was an empire of jurisdiction. He controlled it by appointing local leaders who answered to him and, most importantly, by collecting tribute. It was a smart and effective model for imperial control that worked for thousands of years.
So, that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? David's blueprint was pretty clear. You need military force, you need strategic territory, and you need economic tribute. Now, 3,000 years later, what are the fundamental building blocks of power today? What's changed? And maybe more importantly, what has stayed exactly the same?